I never imagined I'd be starting over at 65 with nothing but an old suitcase and a second-hand coat that didn't quite keep out the cold. Life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it, stripping you of the things you thought were solid, your career, your home, even the love of your own child. I used to think I was needed, respected even. After all, I had spent over 4 decades in the classroom, shaping young minds, wiping away tears, staying late to rewrite lesson plans, and showing up early to fix the coffee machine no one else would touch. I wasn't just a teacher. I was the woman who remembered birthdays, who kept spare pencils in her drawer, who still mailed handwritten thank you cards. My name was Margaret Hayes, and for 43 years, room 12B was my whole world. That world ended on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the clouds feel too low and everything smells like wet pavement and regret. I remember standing in front of the principal's office, my hands still damp from the hallway, thinking I was being called in about the new reading program. But when I walked in and saw Mr. Calhoun, not just the principal, but the district supervisor beside him, I knew. They didn't even sit me down, just handed me an envelope and said the district was moving in a new direction. The words felt like static. My heart thudded in my chest, and all I could think was, I'm not ready. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have savings. I wasn't supposed to be done yet. They called it a soft retirement. Said I should be proud that I'd earned a rest. But rest doesn't pay rent, and pride doesn't fill a fridge. I left the school with my nameplate, a small box of books, and a grief I couldn't quite explain. I wasn't just losing a job. I was losing my rhythm, my purpose, my place in the world. Still, I told myself not to panic. I had Brian, my only son. He and his wife, Lori, had a nice house on the edge of town, 2 kids, a golden retriever, the whole catalog picture life. Surely they wouldn't let me struggle alone. After everything I'd done, raising Brian alone after his father left, working 2 jobs to get him through college, helping with the down payment on that very house, I believed deep in my bones that he'd be there for me now. But belief, I would soon learn, can be a dangerous thing. Brian opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lori stood behind him, arms crossed, eyebrows already pinched with concern, or maybe annoyance. The kids were upstairs, their laughter faint through the ceiling. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh baked bread, and for a second I let myself believe I was home. But the warmth faded quickly. I sat at their kitchen island, clutching my purse like it might anchor me. Brian poured coffee the same way I used to for him during finals week, and asked, "So, what's going on, Mom?" I told him everything. How the district had let me go, how I'd gotten a small severance, but nothing that would last, how I just needed a little time to figure out what came next. I didn't ask for much. Just a couch, maybe a spare room, a few weeks, a place to breathe. Lori didn't say much at first, just stirred her tea with a slow, repetitive clink. Brian leaned back, exhaling like I dropped a burden into his lap. "It's not that we don't want to help," he began, and already my stomach turned. "It's just the house is kind of tight right now. The kids have their own rooms. Lori's working remotely, and I need the garage for my studio setup. There's not really a space that makes sense." I smiled politely. "The couch is fine. I won't be in the way." Lori looked up, finally. "It's not just space, Margaret. It's the kids. They've got their routines, their homework zones. And we haven't really child-proofed things for, someone older." Child-proofed for someone older. The words hit harder than they should have, like I was a hazard, a walking disruption. I looked at Brian, hoping for even a flicker of warmth. Instead, I got silence. "I could help," I offered. "Around the house. With groceries, laundry. I won't be a burden." Brian ran a hand through his hair. "Didn't you save anything for retirement?" I wanted to lie. Wanted to say yes, that I'd planned ahead. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. I'd put everything into him, his college tuition, their first mortgage. even that emergency fund when Lori lost her job a few years back. I had chosen him over and over again, and now there was nothing left. I thought I had more time, I said quietly. Lori stood. Maybe a senior community would be better. Some of them are affordable and they're suited to your needs. My throat closed. I didn't have the money for that. I barely had enough for groceries. Brian looked away. Mom, I just don't know what else we can do right now. That was it. No warmth, no promise to revisit the idea, no hug at the door. Just 2 polite smiles and 1,000 unspoken ways of saying, we don't want you here. They let me stay one night. A mercy. I slept in the guest room, still painted with pastel clouds from when the kids were babies. In the morning, Lori handed me a bag of muffins and a folded blanket, in case it gets cold. Brian walked me to the curb, where my car sat like a reminder of everything I didn't have. He didn't say much. Just, let me know when you get settled, okay? Settled where? I drove away with no destination, no plan, and the quiet ache of realizing that love, real love, should never come with conditions. The RV had been sitting in storage for years, tucked behind my friend Sandra's old barn. It was a 1991 Winnebago with peeling paint and a leak in the skylight. I bought it back when I still believed in road trips and second chances. It smelled like dust, rust, and forgotten plans. But it was mine. I parked it in a lot near the highway, where no one asked questions as long as you paid in cash. At night, I curled up on the built-in bench with my coat pulled tight, listening to the low hum of 18-wheelers groaning past. The thin insulation didn't hold back the cold. My breath fogged the windows. Sometimes I left the radio on just to pretend I wasn't alone. Each morning, I'd wipe the condensation off the windshield and drive aimlessly through town, searching for jobs. I printed out my resume at the library, typed out in Times New Roman, like that would make me look more capable, and walked it into every business with a help wanted sign in the window. A grocery store manager looked me up and down before saying, "We're looking for someone a bit more active. Stocking shelves takes muscle, ma'am." At a motel front desk, the young woman barely glanced at my application before asking if I even knew how to use their booking software. I even offered to clean rooms. She smiled politely and said, "We already have someone, but thank you." The worst was the gas station on 5th and Clover. The owner looked sympathetic, then said, "People don't like being reminded of their mothers when they buy cigarettes." He chuckled like it was a joke. My knees ached after a few hours of walking. I stopped counting how many times I was told, "We'll keep your resume on file." Some didn't even bother lying. I ate peanut butter on crackers most days. The little money I had left went to gas and a gym membership, not to work out, but to shower. I started avoiding mirrors. My skin looked thin, my eyes older than I remembered. I tried calling Brian once. Just once. It went to voicemail. "Hey," I said softly. "Just wanted to hear your voice. I'm okay, just wanted to check in." I hung up before I could say I miss you, before I could beg. He never called back. Lori sent a text a few days later. "Hope you're doing all right. The kids say hi." I stared at the message for a long time. The kids don't have phones. Lori must have typed it herself. I didn't respond. One night, the rain came hard. It slipped through the cracked skylight and soaked the blanket I'd been sleeping under. I sat up, shivering, water dripping down my neck. The mattress was damp. The roof creaked. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass and whispered, "Is this it? Is this where I end?" I had no one left to call. No safety net. Just the hum of the highway and the loneliness of a life that had moved on without me. And just when I thought it couldn't get any darker, my phone rang. It was just past midnight when my phone buzzed on the tiny ledge beside the sink. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, area code I hadn't seen in years. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was tired, soaked to the skin, and the last thing I needed was another spam caller asking about my car warranty. But something in me, a flicker I hadn't felt in weeks, urged me to pick up. Hello. My voice cracked from disuse. There was a pause, then a voice, smooth and steady. Is this Margaret Hayes? I hesitated. Yes. Who's calling? My name is Ethan Miller. I'm sorry to call so late. I hope I didn't wake you. Ethan Miller. The name didn't land at first. Then something clicked. A pair of too big glasses. A boy in the back row who never raised his hand, but always turned in perfect essays. I hadn't said his name aloud in over 30 years. Ethan, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, from Ridgeway Elementary. He laughed softly. Yeah, that Ethan. I've been looking for you. I sat down on the damp bench, stunned. Why? Another pause. Then, because I owe you more than you'll ever know. He told me everything. How he'd been the kid no one believed in. The one teachers gave up on because he didn't talk much, didn't play sports, didn't fit the mold. But I had seen something in him. I had given him a journal. I remembered now, the blue one with a silver clasp. I'd written inside the cover, "Your words matter. Keep writing." He did. Ethan Miller was now the CEO of a successful publishing company in Seattle. He had a wife, 2 children, and a foundation that funded literacy programs for underprivileged youth. He said he'd been trying to track me down for months. My name had popped up in an alumni article about retirees, but then nothing. No address, no public profile, no trace. Until today, he said. I ran into Mr. Daniels. He taught music after you left. He mentioned something about you living in an RV. I'm sorry if this is intrusive, but I could not call. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not shame. Hope. I don't know what to say, I murmured. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just let me help. I didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched, thick and uncertain. I'm not calling out of pity, he added. I'm calling because you changed my life, and I'd like to return the favor if you'll let me. No one had said anything like that to me in a long, long time. I looked around at the dim RV, the stained ceiling, the soaked blanket. I thought of Brian's face when he told me there was no room for me. And then I thought of Ethan, a boy I barely remembered, reaching across time to lift me up when I had nothing left. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I'll think about it, I whispered. But thank you, Ethan. Truly. Any time, he said. And Margaret, you were never forgotten. The apartment wasn't flashy. It wasn't perched on a hill or nestled in a luxury high-rise. But it had sunlight, real, warm sunlight that poured through the tall windows every morning and danced across the hardwood floors. The kitchen was small but new, with a little breakfast nook that looked out over the water. The bedroom held a queen-size bed with sheets so soft I cried the first night I laid on them. Ethan had arranged everything. Quietly, respectfully. No fanfare. He wired enough money to cover the deposit and a year of rent. Insisted on helping furnish it. Just the basics, he said. But even the basics felt like a palace after weeks in the cold. I bought groceries for the first time in a month. Real food. Fresh eggs. A bag of oranges. Whole milk in a glass bottle. I made a pot of stew, the kind I used to cook on snow days when Brian was little, and the smell wrapped around me like a blanket. I started waking up early again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took slow walks along the pier, watching the fishermen prep their boats and the seagulls argue overhead. I went to the library and checked out books I hadn't read in years. I even joined a small book club at the community center. They welcomed me like I'd always belonged, and I started writing, just a little at first. Memories, letters I never sent, short reflections on the classroom, on motherhood, on the strange shape of silence after you've been cast aside. Ethan had offered me a part-time consulting role with his foundation. Nothing demanding, just reviewing children's manuscripts, giving feedback, helping train new mentors. I accepted. For the first time in a long time, I felt useful again. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my new bathroom. My hair was brushed and softly curled. I wore a deep green cardigan, my favorite brooch pinned at the collar. I looked alive. I looked like myself, not the woman who had been turned away at her son's door, not the figure hunched in the corner of an RV, shivering under a wet blanket, but Margaret Hayes, teacher, survivor, woman reborn. I poured a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor. There were still bills to think about, still scars that hadn't quite faded. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Then, just as I was beginning to feel truly settled, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Brian. I stared at it. The steam from my tea curled in the air between us like a ghost. He called again, and again. By the fourth ring, I picked up. Mom. Brian's voice was hesitant, thin, like a thread stretched too tight. I leaned back in my chair, one hand wrapped around the warm mug of tea, the other resting on my lap. Hi, Brian. My voice was calm, steady, almost foreign to myself. I've been trying to reach you, he said quickly. I was worried. Were you? I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I let the silence do the work. I heard you moved, he continued. Laurie's sister mentioned it. Something about a place near the marina. Ah, so that's how the rumor started. A neighbor, a casual comment, a little too much curiosity. I wondered how long it took before someone mentioned that I'd gotten back on my feet, and how fast that news traveled to their dinner table. I just wanted to see how you were, he added, softer this time. It's been a rough few weeks for us. There it was, the opening act. I'm well, I said simply. Pause. Then, would you like to meet for lunch? Just the two of us. I feel like we need to talk. A month ago, I would have said yes before he finished the sentence. But today, I didn't answer right away. I let the weight of his silence press into the line between us. Finally, I said, all right. We met at a bistro downtown. The kind Laurie used to complain was too expensive. Brian chose it. Probably thought it would impress me. I arrived early, sat by the window, watching people pass by, clutching their coats against the wind. When Brian walked in, he looked surprised, like he hadn't expected me to look different. My hair was done. My clothes were neat, tailored. I carried myself like someone who didn't need anything. Mom, he said, blinking. You look great. I feel great. We ordered. Small talk followed. Stiff. Empty. He asked about my apartment. I told him about the book club. He nodded in all the right places, smiled at all the right times. But there was something behind his eyes. Tension. A calculation. Finally, he set his fork down and sighed. Things have been tough lately. Really tough. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry to hear that. The mortgage is piling up, he said. Laurie's hours got cut, and the kids, well, you know how expensive school is now. I sipped my water. We were thinking, he continued, forcing a chuckle, since things are going well for you now, maybe you could, I don't know, help us out a bit? Just until we catch up. For the kids. There it was, the real reason for lunch. I set my glass down gently. When I asked to stay with you, just until I figured things out, do you remember what you said? His face reddened slightly. Mom, come on. That was different. We didn't know. No, I interrupted, soft but firm. You did know. You knew I had nowhere to go. And you made your choice. He looked down at his plate. I was overwhelmed. We didn't expect you to lose everything. I finished for him. Neither did I. He looked up, eyes wide. So that's it? You won't help us? I smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was the kind of smile that comes after surviving a storm. Lunch is on me, Brian. Consider it my only contribution. He stared at me, stunned. You can't be serious. You have money now. You're living in a beautiful place. And we're your family, Family. That word. So easy to say when there's something to gain. You're right, I said quietly. And when I needed mine, I was sleeping in a leaking RV. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I stood, adjusted my coat, and looked at him one last time. Take care of your kids, Brian. But this time, you'll have to do it without me. Then I walked away. No drama, no tears, no turning back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left behind. The sun spilled across my windows that morning like warm honey. Outside, the ocean moved slow and steady, breathing in and out like it had all the time in the world. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting through the air, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was late for something. I didn't feel like I was behind or chasing or proving. I was just living. I spent the next few days doing things that had no urgency, no purpose beyond joy. I planted rosemary in a clay pot for the balcony. I bought a second-hand bicycle with a wicker basket and rode it down the path by the dunes. I read poetry out loud in my living room, just for the sound of it. Brian didn't call again. Neither did Lori. And strangely, that didn't hurt anymore. The wound was still there, of course. It always would be. But it had scarred over, tough and quiet. I had grieved what needed to be grieved. And now I was building something new in its place. Ethan visited once, with his wife and 2 kids. We sat out on the patio with lemonade and laughed about the old days. He told me they were naming their new scholarship after me, the Hayes Fund. I didn't cry in front of them. But when they left, I held the note he'd written in my hand for a long time. You gave me my voice when I didn't have one. Now it's your turn to be heard. That night, I opened my laptop again. The cursor blinked on the screen like a pulse. I didn't know what I was writing yet. Maybe a memoir. Maybe just a letter to the woman I used to be. But I knew this much. I would never beg for love again. I would never shrink to make someone else comfortable. And I would never forget what it felt like to stand in the rain with nowhere to go. Because that memory, that ache, was what would keep me grounded. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about letting go for yourself. I stood by the window, watching the last light of the day dip beneath the horizon. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but full. Full of possibility, full of peace, full of me.